I never thought the hardest battle I'd face would be walking through my own front door. But there I was, standing in the driveway of our house in Fayetteville, North Carolina, at 2300 hours on a Tuesday in October, watching my wife through the kitchen window as she threw her head back laughing at something a man I'd never seen before had just said. I'd flown 32 hours from Kandahar to surprise her. Command had approved my early return after I took shrapnel in my left shoulder during a patrol in Helmand Province. Nothing life-threatening, the doc said, but enough to send me stateside for recovery. I'd kept it secret, wanting to see Jessica's face when I walked through that door 2 months ahead of schedule. Wanted to hold her, tell her I was okay, that I'd made it home safe from my 4th deployment. Instead, I stood there in my desert camis duffel bag at my feet, watching this guy in expensive jeans and a polo shirt lean against my kitchen counter like he owned the place. He was younger than me, maybe 32, 33. Clean hands. Probably never held anything heavier than a golf club in his life. Jessica was wearing the red dress I'd bought her before I deployed, the one she said she was saving for when I got home. Her hair was down, the way she knew I loved it. She touched his arm when she laughed. Just a light touch, but I'd been married to this woman for 14 years. I knew every gesture, every expression. That wasn't a friendly touch. My name is Nathan Pierce. I'm 52 years old and I've served in the United States Army for 31 years. I've done 4 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. I've led men into firefights, pulled wounded soldiers from burning vehicles, and watched brothers die in my arms. I thought I knew what fear felt like, what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. I stood in that driveway for maybe 10 minutes, watching them. The guy finally left through the front door, and I pressed myself against the garage wall so he wouldn't see me. He drove off in a Tesla, a goddamn Tesla. When his taillights disappeared down our street, I picked up my duffel and walked to the door. Jessica was still in the kitchen, humming while she loaded the dishwasher. I could hear her through the door. Some pop song I didn't recognize. Everything in my life for the past 9 months had been the sound of helicopters, explosions, men shouting orders. And here she was, humming like she didn't have a care in the world. I used my key. The lock clicked. The humming stopped. Nathan? Her voice came from the kitchen, uncertain. Is that you? I walked through the living room. Everything looked different. New throw pillows on the couch, different curtains. A painting on the wall that I'd never seen before. Modern art, abstract shapes in colors that hurt my eyes. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and for a second, just a second, I saw real joy on her face. Then it shifted to something else. Panic, maybe. Guilt. Oh my God, she said. You're home early. You didn't tell me. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to surprise you. My voice sounded flat even to my own ears. Looks like I did. She came toward me, arms outstretched, but I stepped back. She froze. Nathan, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Who was he? The guy in the Tesla, the one you were laughing with in our kitchen, wearing the dress I bought you. Her face went white. That's just Derek. He's a colleague from the hospital. We were going over some case files. At 2300 hours. In your home, in that dress. It's not what you think. I've heard that line before, Jess. Usually right before someone tells me exactly what I think it is. She started crying then. The tears I'd seen 1,000 times when I deployed, when I called from down bases in the middle of nowhere, when I missed birthdays and anniversaries because I was halfway around the world keeping people safe. Those same tears. But this time, they just made me angry. How long? I asked. How long has this been going on? Nothing's going on. Nathan, please. You're exhausted. You're hurt. She gestured at my shoulder, where blood had started to seep through my uniform. Oh God, you're bleeding. Let me help you. Answer the question. How long? She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the table where we'd eaten breakfast together for over a decade, where we'd told each other about our days, where I'd proposed to her 17 years ago on a Sunday morning with terrible coffee and slightly burned toast. The table where she'd told me she was pregnant with the baby we lost at 12 weeks. The table where we'd signed our mortgage papers. The table where we'd planned our entire lives together. 6 months, she whispered. It started 6 months ago. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart breaking. That was too poetic. This was more brutal, like a bone snapping. Like the time I'd taken a bullet to my vest in Fallujah and couldn't breathe for 30 seconds, Just stood there gasping while my lungs refused to work. 6 months, I repeated. You waited 3 months after I deployed, and then what? Decided you were lonely? Decided I wasn't worth waiting for? It wasn't like that. Her voice was small, broken. Nathan, you don't understand what it's like. You leave and I'm here alone. The house is empty, the bed is empty. I go to sleep every night terrified that someone's going to knock on the door and tell me you're dead. So you found someone to fill the empty bed? That was your solution? She flinched. Don't make it sound like that. Then tell me what it sounds like, Jessica. Tell me how this is anything other than what it looks like. You met someone. You let him into our home, into our life. You wore the dress I bought you. Did you think about me at all when you were with him? Did it cross your mind even once that I was in the desert getting shot at while you were playing house with Derek from the hospital? 6 months. I'd been deployed for 9. That meant she'd waited exactly 90 days after I left before she started whatever this was with Derek from the hospital. I did the math automatically, the way the army trains you to calculate everything. Distance, time, resources, casualties, 90 days. That's how long our vows lasted when I wasn't physically present to enforce them. I thought about those 90 days. June, July, August. I'd been in Kandahar training Afghan National Army units, teaching them how to patrol, how to identify IEDs, how to stay alive. I'd called her every chance I got. Terrible satellite connections where we'd shout over the delays. I love you. I miss you. Can't wait to come home. And she'd said it back, every single time. I love you too. Be safe. Come home to me. Had she already met him by then? Had Derek already started at the hospital? Or was I talking to her while she was texting him, planning their next dinner, their next whatever the hell they were doing together? Did you sleep with him? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. I need you to leave, I said. Pack a bag. Go to your sister's. I can't look at you right now. Nathan, please. Can't we just talk about this? You've been gone so much. I was lonely. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. That's what people say when they destroy everything and want you to pretend it doesn't matter. Like it's just a small thing, an accident, something that can be waved away with apologies and excuses. I've been gone so much, I repeated slowly, because I've been serving our country, because I took an oath, because I believed I was protecting people like you, so you could live safe, comfortable lives. And you were lonely. She was sobbing now. Full body-shaking sobs. It didn't move me the way it once would have. I'd seen too much real suffering, watched children in Kabul dig through rubble for family members, held dying 20-year-olds who cried for their mothers. This was self-pity, not pain. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, I said. Tomorrow you pack your things and you leave. I want you out of this house. She left the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the bedroom door closing. I stood there in my bloody uniform, in the kitchen that didn't feel like mine anymore, and I realized I had no idea what happened next. The army had taught me how to survive in deserts and mountains, how to lead men in combat, how to make impossible decisions under fire. Nobody taught me how to survive this. I grabbed a beer from the fridge. There were only 3. She'd never kept the fridge stocked the way she used to, and went out to the back porch. The North Carolina night was warm, humid, so different from the dry cold of the Afghan mountains where I'd been just 2 days ago. Felt like a different planet. My shoulder was throbbing. I probably needed to change the dressing, maybe get it looked at by a real doctor instead of the combat medic who'd patched me up in the field. But I couldn't bring myself to care. The physical pain was almost welcome, gave me something concrete to focus on. I sat there until dawn, drinking those 3 beers slowly, watching the sky lighten from black to grey to pink, thinking about 14 years of marriage, about the woman I'd met at a friend's barbecue when I was 38 and she was 24, fresh out of nursing school, how she'd laughed at my terrible jokes, how she'd said she didn't mind dating a soldier, that she understood the sacrifices. She'd been so young then, so sure of herself, so convinced that love was enough to overcome anything. I remember her telling me about her father, how he'd walked out when she was 6, how her mother had raised her alone. She'd said she understood what it meant to wait for someone, to be strong when life got hard. She'd promised she'd never leave, never give up on us. I'd believed her. God help me. I'd actually believed her. The sunrise reminded me of another sunrise 3 weeks ago. We'd been pinned down by Taliban fighters in a village outside Kandahar. My squad, 9 men, trapped in a building with limited ammo and no immediate evac available. We'd fought from midnight until dawn. 6 hours of hell. 3 of my guys were wounded, 1 critically. When the sun finally came up and our air support arrived, I'd stood in that doorway covered in blood, some mine, most not, and I'd thought about Jessica, about coming home to her, about holding her and feeling safe for the first time in months. That thought had kept me going through the firefight, through the evacuation, through the hours of surgery on my shoulder. Now that thought felt like a lie. Like every good thing I'd held on to in the darkness had been nothing but my own desperate fantasy. Apparently she'd lied about that last part. When the sun was fully up, I went inside. Jessica was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept. Good. Her eyes were red and swollen. She'd changed out of the red dress into sweatpants and one of my old army t-shirts. That made it worse somehow. Seeing her in my shirt while she sat there having destroyed everything. I called my sister, she said. I'm going to stay with her for a while. But Nathan, we need to talk about this eventually. We need to figure out what happens next. What happens next is you leave, and I figure out if I want to stay married to someone who couldn't keep her vows for 9 months. You were gone for 9 months. She said it carefully, like she'd been rehearsing the line, like she thought if she got the tone right, it might justify what she'd done. Nathan, you've been deployed 4 times in the last 6 years. That's more than half our marriage. I've spent more nights alone in this house than I've spent with you. And that's my fault? That's what you're telling me, that I'm to blame because I served my country? I'm not saying it's your fault, I'm saying it's hard. It's so hard, Nathan. You leave and I have to put on a brave face, have to tell everyone I'm fine when I'm terrified every single day. Have to look at the news and see soldiers dying and wonder if you're next. Have to sleep in an empty bed and wake up alone and go through every single day pretending like my heart isn't in Afghanistan with you. Her voice broke and she started crying again. Harder this time. I thought of you constantly. Every day, every hour. Derek, he was just there. He listened. He didn't leave. He didn't choose something else over me. I chose to serve. I chose to honor my oath. I chose to do something that mattered. But I never, not for 1 second, chose that over you. Every decision I made, every moment I was over there, you were the reason I kept going. You were home. You were what I was fighting to get back to. I stood there looking at this woman I'd loved for 14 years, and I didn't recognize her anymore. Or maybe I'd never really known her at all. Pack your things, I said. All of them. I want you gone by noon. You were gone for 9 months. She said it like that justified everything. You've been gone more than you've been home for the past 4 years. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to be my wife. I expected you to honor the promises you made. I expected you to have even a fraction of the integrity I thought you had when I married you. She stood up, grabbed her purse. Fine, I'll go. But don't pretend you're the victim here, Nathan. Don't pretend your service didn't cost us both something. She left. I heard her car pull out of the driveway, and then the house was silent. Completely, utterly silent, in a way that combat zones never are. In war, there's always noise. Generators, helicopters, radio chatter, wind. This silence was worse. I should have called someone. My CO to report that I was stateside. My sister, who lived 2 hours away in Raleigh. Somebody from my unit, any of the guys who'd understand. Instead, I sat on that couch with the new throw pillows and stared at the wall until my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But old habits die hard. And in the military you answer your phone. Is this Nathan Pierce? A man's voice, older, rough around the edges. Speaking. Who's this? My name is Frank Wolcott. I'm the director of the Carolina Veterans Foundation. I got your name from a mutual friend, Captain Mike Sullivan. He said you just got back from Afghanistan. Sullivan was one of my guys, a young captain I'd mentored in Kandahar. Good kid, great instincts. Just got back yesterday, I said. Why? Mike told me about your situation. I hope you don't mind. He thought I might be able to help. I don't need charity. The words came out harsher than I intended. Good thing I'm not offering any. Frank's voice had a hint of amusement. I'm offering a job. We're starting a new program, helping veterans transition back to civilian life. We need someone with your experience to run it, someone who understands what these guys are going through, because he's lived it. I'm not exactly in a place to take on new responsibilities right now. Mike said you might say that. He also said, you're the kind of guy who does his best work when everything else is falling apart. That true? I thought about it. Thought about sitting in this house that wasn't mine anymore, stewing in betrayal and anger. Thought about having nothing to do, nowhere to go, no mission to complete. Tell me more about this program, I said. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop in downtown Fayetteville. Frank Wolcott was 73 years old, Vietnam veteran, Silver Star recipient. He'd started the Carolina Veterans Foundation 20 years ago, after his own son came back from the first Gulf War with PTSD and nowhere to turn. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. Old habits. You can always tell a combat vet by where they sit. Frank had white hair buzzed military short, weathered skin that looked like leather, and eyes that had seen too much. Nathan Pierce. He stood when I approached, offered his hand. His grip was still strong, firm, a man who hadn't let age make him soft. Frank Wolcott. Sit down. You look like hell, if you don't mind me saying so. I don't mind. I feel like hell, so it's accurate. He ordered us both coffee, black, no sugar. Mike Sullivan speaks highly of you. Said you're the best NCO he's ever served under. Said you pulled him out of a burning Humvee in Helmand and carried him 200 yards while taking fire. Mike talks too much. Mike's alive because you wouldn't leave him. That's not talking too much, that's being grateful. Frank leaned back in his seat. He also told me your wife left you, or you left her. Details were fuzzy. She cheated. I came home early from deployment and found her with another man. Ah, yeah, that'll do it. Frank's expression didn't change. My wife left me in '74. I'd been back from Vietnam for 2 years and still wasn't right in the head. Nightmares, drinking. I was angry all the time. She took our daughter and moved back to Ohio. Can't say I blamed her. Did you fix it? No, she remarried in '76. Good guy, apparently. An accountant. Steady. Safe. Everything I wasn't. But I got to see my daughter growing up. She'd visit summers. We made it work. He sipped his coffee. My son, though. My boy, Daniel. He was from my second marriage. That one lasted longer, almost 15 years. Daniel joined up in '89, right before the Gulf. I tried to talk him out of it. Told him what war does to you, he didn't listen. 19 years old and convinced he was invincible. Mike mentioned you lost him. Frank's face tightened. The kid put a gun in his mouth 6 months after he got home. I wasn't there. Didn't know how bad it was. Thought he'd be fine because I was fine after Vietnam, but we weren't fine, none of us. We just didn't talk about it. We buried it and let it rot inside us and pretended we were okay. I'm sorry, I said, and I was. I lost men to combat and suicide both. Sometimes the second hurt worse because it felt preventable, like if you'd just said the right thing or noticed the signs or been there at the right moment, you could have changed everything. Don't be sorry. Be useful. Frank leaned forward. I've spent 2 decades trying to make sure other fathers don't lose their sons the way I lost mine. But I'm old, Nathan. I'm tired. And the need is bigger than ever. Do you know how many veterans are homeless in North Carolina? Over 4,000. Do you know how many commit suicide every day in this country? 22. Every single day. 22 families get that knock on the door. 22 funerals. 22 graves that shouldn't exist yet. The number hit me like a punch. 22 a day. That's a platoon. Every single day, we lose a platoon of veterans to suicide. More than we were losing to combat in Iraq or Afghanistan at the height of those wars. What exactly would this job entail? We've got a piece of land out in Sampson County, 300 acres. Used to be a summer camp, but it's been abandoned for years. I bought it 5 years ago with the idea of turning it into a veterans retreat, a place where guys can come, decompress, learn skills, get counseling, whatever they need. But I need someone to run it. Someone who can connect with these men, who they'll respect and listen to. Why me? There are younger guys who are better with people. Frank smiled. Mike showed me your service record. 4 bronze stars, 2 purple hearts, a silver star. You've commanded companies, trained new officers, and from what Mike says, every man who served under you would follow you into hell. That's not about being young or being good with people. That's about being someone men trust with their lives. That's what these veterans need. The salary's decent, Frank continued. Not what you were making in the army, but enough to live on. Housing included, there's a manager's cabin on the property. And Nathan, I'm going to be blunt with you. Mike told me about your wife. Told me you're probably looking for a reason to get out of that house, away from that situation. This could be it. This could be your next mission. I thought about Jessica in our home that wasn't our home anymore. Thought about Derek in his Tesla. Thought about sitting in that silence, doing nothing, being nothing. When can I start? I asked. How about Monday? The property was exactly what Frank had described. 300 acres of pine forest and overgrown fields, a lake that hadn't been maintained in years, and about 15 buildings in various states of decay. The main entrance had a rusted gate hanging off one hinge. The driveway was more potholes than pavement. Trees had grown up through what used to be a parking lot. The manager's cabin was the only structure that was actually livable, and even that needed work. No hot water. The roof leaked in 2 places. The heating system made sounds like it was planning my murder. The windows were so old you could feel the drafts even with them closed. The kitchen had appliances from the 1980s. The bathroom had mold growing in corners I didn't know bathrooms had corners in. But the cabin sat on a small rise overlooking the lake, and when the sun set, the view was beautiful. Pine trees silhouetted against orange and pink sky. The water reflecting everything like a mirror. You could hear owls at night. Couldn't hear traffic or sirens or anything that reminded you of the war that lived inside your head. I loved it immediately. There was something honest about the place. It was broken and neglected, but it had good bones. It could be fixed, unlike some things. Unlike marriages built on promises that crumbled the moment they were tested. Unlike trust that once broken, stayed broken no matter how many apologies you offered. I spent the first week just assessing what needed to be done. Walked every acre, catalogued every building, made lists, plans, timelines, budgets. It was exactly like planning a mission. Identify objectives, assess resources, determine priorities, execute. The main lodge had to be completely rebuilt. The roof was gone in places. Animals had made nests in the walls. The foundation was cracked. It would be easier and cheaper to tear it down and start over than to try to salvage what was there. The bunkhouses needed new roofs, plumbing, electrical. The walls were solid, good bones again, but everything inside needed to be gutted and replaced. Figure 6 months of work minimum per building. 5 bunkhouses meant 2.5 years of constant construction. The dock on the lake had rotted through in places. Someone could fall through and drown. That needed to be priority 1. Quick win. Something we could complete fast to show progress. The land itself was overgrown but salvageable. Fields that used to be recreational areas now covered in waist-high grass and small trees. Woods full of trails that had disappeared under years of fallen leaves and undergrowth. A small pond separate from the main lake that had turned into a swamp. It was overwhelming. In the army, I'd managed logistics for a battalion in a war zone. Hundreds of men, millions of dollars in equipment, supply chains that stretched across continents. But this felt bigger somehow. This felt personal. I couldn't fail at this. I'd already failed at marriage, failed at keeping my wife faithful, failed at being enough for someone I'd loved with everything I had. I couldn't fail these veterans too. Frank came out on Friday with the first group of guys. 6 veterans, ages ranging from 25 to 61. Iraq, Afghanistan, Gulf War, even one Vietnam vet who'd been living under a bridge in Charlotte for the past 3 years. They stood in a semicircle near the main lodge, watching me with expressions I recognized. Wary, guarded, waiting to see if I was going to bullshit them or treat them like charity cases or give them some motivational speech about overcoming adversity and finding their inner strength. They'd heard it all before. From therapists who'd never seen combat, from social workers who meant well but didn't understand, from well-meaning civilians who said, "Thank you for your service," and then looked uncomfortable when veterans actually needed something. "My name is Nathan Pierce," I said. "I'm a Command Sergeant Major, retired as of last month. I did 7 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan combined, 4 in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. I've been blown up twice, shot at more times than I can count, and had to scrape pieces of my friends off the inside of vehicles. I came home 2 weeks ago to find my wife cheating on me. She's gone now. The house is gone. Everything I thought my life was going to be is gone. I'm here because my marriage fell apart while I was deployed, and I needed something to do besides drink myself to death or put a gun in my mouth. So if you're looking for someone who has their shit together and is going to lecture you about positive thinking and the power of gratitude, you're in the wrong place. But if you want to help build something that might actually matter, something that might save the next guy who comes through here, then grab a hammer and let's get to work. There was a long silence. A crow called from somewhere in the pine trees. Wind rustled through dead leaves. One of the younger guys, couldn't have been more than 25, shifted his weight and looked at the ground. Then the oldest veteran, a guy with a grey beard down to his chest and eyes that had seen hell and come back, started laughing. Deep belly laugh that turned into a cough. "Well, shit," he said when he could breathe again. "Finally, someone who's not blowing sunshine up our asses. Where do we start, Sergeant Major?" Carl Rodriguez, Vietnam, 68 to 69, infantry. He'd been living under a bridge in Charlotte for the past 3 years. Before that, he'd spent 13 years in and out of homeless shelters, 2 years in prison for assault, 5 years living in his car. He'd walked away from his family in 1974 because he couldn't stop the nightmares, couldn't stop seeing the faces of the kids he'd killed in villages, whose names he couldn't pronounce, couldn't be a husband or a father, when he couldn't even be human anymore. Marcus Webb, 27, 3 tours in Iraq as a combat medic. He'd been in Fallujah during the second battle in 2004, saw things that no person should ever see, spent his tours trying to put people back together, trying to keep his friends alive, failing more often than he succeeded. He had nightmares so bad he couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. His girlfriend had left him 2 months ago because she said living with him was like living with a ghost, and she was right. He was a ghost, just walking around in a body that hadn't figured out it was supposed to be dead yet. James Parrish, 47, former Marine Corps sniper. Fallujah, Ramadi, Mosul, places where he'd taken shots from 1,000 yards out and watched men drop through his scope. He'd lost his leg to an IED in Fallujah in 2006, spent the last 8 years fighting the VA for proper disability benefits while living in his truck. He'd park behind a Walmart, use their bathroom to clean up, eat whatever he could afford at dollar stores. He had a daughter he hadn't seen in 5 years because he was too ashamed to let her see what he'd become. Trevor Washington, 32, Air Force drone pilot. He'd killed more people than any of us, and he'd done it from an air-conditioned trailer in Nevada, watching them on screens, pushing buttons, going home to dinner afterward. People said that made it easier. It didn't. He saw their faces every time he closed his eyes, watched them die over and over in high definition. His wife divorced him after he stopped being able to touch her without having panic attacks. David Kim, 55, Army Logistics, Gulf War. He'd spent his war moving supplies, never fired his weapon in anger, came home thinking he was fine because he hadn't seen combat. Then the nightmares started. Then the anxiety. Then the drinking. Lost his job. Lost his house. Lost his family. Ended up homeless at 48 and had been living on the streets for 7 years, still trying to figure out why he couldn't just be normal again. And then there was Raymond Fletcher, 61, Vietnam, Special Forces. He'd been in country from 71 to 73, did things he still couldn't talk about, came home to a country that spit on him and called him a baby killer. He'd spent 40 years trying to forget what he'd done for America, working construction, keeping his head down, building a life. Then his wife died of cancer 2 years ago and he fell apart. Started drinking, lost his job, lost his house, ended up living in a tent in the woods outside Durham. Frank had found him at a free clinic, half dead from pneumonia. We started with the dock. It was the smallest project, manageable enough to complete in a few days, which meant a quick win to build morale. Basic construction project that wouldn't overwhelm anyone. Just good, honest work. Measure, cut, nail, repeat. I taught them the basics of carpentry, how to measure twice and cut once, how to check if something was level, how to work as a team. Carl had done construction work decades ago, before Vietnam destroyed him, and his hands remembered even if his mind had tried to forget. He showed the younger guys how to swing a hammer properly, how to read a tape measure, how to tell if a board was warped. Marcus was methodical, careful. He measured everything 3 times before making a cut. Said it reminded him of prepping medical equipment in the field. Everything had to be exact, or people died. Now everything had to be exact or the dock would collapse. Same principle, lower stakes. James worked despite his prosthetic, figured out ways to brace himself, to use his body differently. Refused help unless he asked for it. Pride, probably, or stubbornness. Or the need to prove he was still useful, still capable, still more than just his missing leg and his disability check and his truck he'd been living in. We worked from dawn until the sun went down. 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Hands got blistered, backs got sore, sunburns on necks and arms, but the dock took shape. 4 days of work and we had something solid, something that would last. In the evenings, after we cleaned up and ate whatever I could cook on the camp stove, we'd sit around a fire pit near the lake and talk. Not therapy talk, not forced sharing where someone made you open up about your feelings and your trauma. Just men talking about their lives, their struggles, what kept them up at night. The way soldiers have talked since the beginning of war. Honest. No bullshit. No pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Carl told us about Vietnam, about being 18 years old in a jungle that wanted to kill you, about watching his best friend step on a mine and having to carry pieces of him back to base in a poncho, about coming home to protesters who called him a murderer, about his wife leaving him because he woke up screaming every night, about his kids growing up without him because he couldn't figure out how to be a father when he couldn't even figure out how to be human. I was angry for 40 years, he said, staring into the fire, angry at the army for sending me there, angry at the protesters for hating me, angry at my wife for not understanding, angry at my kids for needing things I couldn't give them, angry at God for letting any of it happen. And then one day, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just empty. And empty is worse than angry. Anger at least makes you feel something. Empty is just nothing all the way down. Marcus talked about Fallujah, about the surge, about being a medic when the casualties were coming in faster than you could treat them, about triaging people, deciding who might live and who was already dead, about holding someone's hand while they died because there was nothing else you could do, about the ones you saved who looked at you like you were a hero, not understanding that you'd let others die to save them. You think about it differently as a medic, he said. Combat guys, they can tell themselves they had to kill. It was them or the enemy. Self-defense. Defense of their brothers. But medics, we're supposed to save everyone. That's the job. And when you can't, when you have to choose, you carry that different. You carry every person you couldn't save like a stone around your neck. And eventually, there's so many stones you can't move anymore. James didn't talk much, but one night, after a few beers, he told us about the shots he'd taken, about looking through a scope and seeing a man's face, seeing him breathe, seeing him laugh at something someone said, and then pulling a trigger and watching that person cease to exist, about how easy it was, how routine it became, how you stopped thinking of them as people and started thinking of them as targets, and then you came home and tried to think of people as people again and couldn't quite manage it. I killed 73 men, he said. Confirmed kills. Probably more that we couldn't confirm. 73 lives ended because I was good at my job, and the thing that keeps me up at night isn't that I killed them. It's that I was good at it, that I liked it, that I felt proud when I made a difficult shot. What kind of man does that make me? Nobody answered because we all knew. We'd all felt it. That dark satisfaction when you did your job well, even when your job was destroying other human beings. That pride in excellence, even when excellence meant death. The military trained you for that, rewarded you for it, and then sent you home and expected you to turn it off like a light switch. We worked on that dock for 5 days straight. When we finished, it was solid. Better than solid. It would last another 30 years easy. We stood on it together, 6 broken men and me looking out over that lake, and Carl said, I forgot what it feels like to build something instead of watching everything fall apart. That's when I knew Frank was right. This was exactly where I needed to be. Over the next 3 months, more veterans came through. Some stayed a few days, some stayed weeks. We worked on the buildings, cleared the overgrown fields, restocked the lake with fish. Frank secured grants and donations, enough to hire a part-time counselor and a cook. The place started to come alive, and somewhere in all of that, I started to come alive too. I wasn't thinking about Jessica every hour anymore. Wasn't imagining her with Derek, wondering what I'd done wrong, how I'd failed. I was too busy, too focused on the mission, on helping these men find their way back. I filed for divorce in January. The paperwork was simple. Irreconcilable differences. That's what they call it when your spouse destroys your trust, and you can't find a way to rebuild it. When every time you look at them, you see them with someone else. When you can't share a bed without wondering if they're thinking about him, if they ever compared you, if you were lacking somehow. Jessica didn't contest it. She wanted the house, said she deserved it after all the years she'd sacrificed being a military wife, all the birthdays I'd missed, all the anniversaries I'd spent in the desert, all the times she'd gone to bed alone and woken up alone and lived her life alone while I was overseas serving. I gave it to her, signed it over without argument. I didn't want anything that reminded me of what I'd lost, or what I thought I'd lost. The house where we'd made love and had fights and cooked dinners and watched movies and built a life that turned out to be constructed on sand. Where she'd laughed with Derek in our kitchen wearing the dress I'd bought her. Where she'd lied to my face every time I'd called from Afghanistan, asking how she was doing, saying she missed me, saying she loved me, saying she couldn't wait for me to come home. The divorce was finalized in March. I signed the papers in Frank's office at the foundation headquarters. Took about 5 minutes. 16 years of marriage dissolved with a signature and a notary stamp. Frank offered to take me out for a drink. I declined, went back to the camp instead. I worked on replacing the roof of Bunkhouse 3 until my hands bled. Up there in the cold March wind, ripping off old shingles that had been there since the 1980s, exposing the rotted plywood underneath, tearing it all out so we could rebuild it properly. My hands were raw, blisters on top of blisters, blood mixing with dirt and sweat. Felt good. Felt like I was destroying something, and destruction felt right that day. Marcus found me up there at 1900 hours, prying up old shingles in the near dark. Sun was almost down, temperature dropping. I could see my breath. "Sergeant Major," he called up from the ground. "You planning to work all night?" "Maybe. Got nothing else to do." He climbed up the ladder, sat down on the roof beside me. His leg was bothering him, I could tell. He tried to hide the limp, but I'd been watching him work for months. Knew when the old injuries flared up, knew when the pain was bad. "You heard from your ex?" "Not since the papers went through." "Why?" "Just wondering if you're up here destroying your hands because you miss her, or because you're angry." I set down the pry bar, looked out over the camp. We'd accomplished so much in 4 months. The dock was solid. 3 of the bunkhouses had new roofs. The main lodge was half-framed. Fields were cleared. Trails were reopened. We had a functioning camp, something real, something that mattered. "Both," I said. "Neither." "I don't know, Marcus. I thought I knew what my life was going to be. Thought I'd serve my time, retire, grow old with someone who understood the sacrifices, who understood what I'd given up to serve. Turns out I was wrong about all of it. Wrong about her. Wrong about what we had. Wrong about thinking love was enough to survive anything." He was quiet for a while. Just sat there next to me watching the sun set, watching the sky turn orange and purple and finally dark blue. "You weren't wrong about the work, though," he said eventually. He gestured at the camp spread out below us, the bunkhouses, the lodge, the dock, the lake reflecting the last light. The men moving around, Carl starting a fire pit, James carrying firewood, the others gathering for dinner. "Look at what you've built here. Look at what you're doing for guys like me." "That matters, Sergeant Major. That matters more than one person who couldn't see what she had. Easy to say, harder to believe. Then, let me tell you something." He looked at me directly. "I was going to kill myself before I came here. Had everything planned out. Bought the pills. Wrote the notes. One to my parents, one to my ex-girlfriend, one to my old squad. Had a date picked. Had the method figured out. I was done. Completely done. Couldn't see any reason to keep going. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't work. Couldn't function. Just wanted the noise in my head to stop. Marcus, I didn't know. Nobody knew. That was the point. I was good at hiding it. You get good at pretending everything's fine when everything's falling apart. But then Frank found me. Practically dragged me out here, and I met you, and I saw what you were building. And for the first time in 3 years, I had something to wake up for. This place. You. These guys. Knowing that tomorrow I'd get up and we'd work on something. Build something. Fix something. Make something better than it was. He wiped his eyes. "I'm not saying you saved my life. That sounds dramatic. But you gave me a reason to keep it. And that's more than anyone else did. So maybe your marriage failed. Maybe she couldn't handle the reality of being married to someone who chose to serve. But you're saving lives here. You saved mine. You're saving Carl's. You're saving James's. You're saving every guy who comes through here and finds hope instead of just more emptiness. That's got to count for something. I didn't know what to say to that. Couldn't find words that felt adequate. So I just nodded, and we sat there on that roof, watching night settle over the camp, and I thought maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this was enough. Maybe this could be enough. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded, and we sat there on that roof, watching the sun set over the pine trees, and I thought maybe Marcus was right. Maybe this was enough. In April, Frank called me with news. We got a major donor, he said, barely containing his excitement. Anonymous benefactor wants to fund a massive expansion, new medical facility, workshops for job training, housing for long-term residents. Nathan, this is big. This is everything we dreamed about and more. How much are we talking? $10 million over the next 5 years, with potential for more if we can prove the program works. 10 million. That was generosity on a scale I couldn't comprehend. Who donates that kind of money anonymously? I want to meet them, I said. Need to thank them, make sure they understand what we're doing here. They specifically requested no meeting. They want to stay completely anonymous. All I know is that the money's coming through a trust managed by a law firm in Raleigh. But Nathan, there's a condition. Of course there is. What? They want you to be the permanent director. They want your commitment that you'll stay and run this program for at least the next 10 years. It's non-negotiable. 10 years. That would take me to 62. I'd be retired from the army, completely committed to this civilian life I was still figuring out how to live. Tell them yes, I said. Tell them I'm in. The expansion started in May. Construction crews, architects, engineers. The quiet camp became a hub of activity. We kept the core program running, kept bringing in veterans. But now we had real resources. A medical clinic where guys could get treatment without waiting months for VA appointments. A workshop with tools where they could learn carpentry, welding, automotive repair. Housing units where long-term residents could have their own space, their own dignity. By September, we had 24 veterans living on site full-time. 50 more came through our day programs. The success stories started piling up. Carl Rodriguez got a job as a carpenter with a local contractor and moved into his own apartment for the first time in 16 years. Marcus Webb went back to school to become a licensed therapist, specifically to work with other combat veterans. James Parrish started a woodworking business making custom furniture, hired 3 other disabled veterans to work with him. This was working, really working. And I felt something I hadn't felt since before Jessica, before the betrayal, before everything fell apart. I felt proud. In October, exactly 1 year after I came home to find my wife with another man, Frank called me into his office. There was someone with him. A woman, maybe mid-60s, wearing an expensive suit, perfectly styled grey hair. She had the look of someone used to boardrooms and power. "Nathan," Frank said, "this is Margaret Whitmore. She's a representative from the Whitmore Family Trust." "The trust that's funding our expansion?" I shook her hand. "It's an honor. We can't thank you enough for what you've done for these veterans." Margaret smiled. "Actually, Sergeant Major Pierce, I'm just the messenger. I'm here on behalf of my employer, who would like to meet you in person. She's decided it's time to reveal herself. She, the anonymous donor, was a woman? Yes. She's waiting outside if you're willing to meet her. Of course, I'd like to thank her personally for changing these men's lives." Margaret walked to the door and opened it, and Jessica walked in. I actually took a step back, stared at her like she was a ghost. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, she was thinner. But it was definitely her, standing in Frank's office, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "What the hell is this?" I looked at Frank. "What is she doing here?" "Nathan," Frank said gently, "Jessica is the anonymous donor. The 10 million came from her. That's impossible. She didn't have that kind of money. We lived on my army salary and her nursing income. We were comfortable, but we weren't rich." Jessica stepped forward. "Can we talk? Privately?" I looked at Frank. He nodded. Margaret had already slipped out. It was just the three of us. "I don't understand," I said. "Where did you get $10 million?" Jessica sat down in one of Frank's chairs. She looked nervous, kept twisting her wedding ring. Wait, she was still wearing her wedding ring? "After you left, after the divorce, I sold the house. I moved back to my hometown in Pennsylvania, and I went to see someone I should have visited years ago. My father. Your father walked out when you were 6. You told me you hadn't seen him since you were a kid. I lied." She looked down at her hands. "I've been in contact with him for about 8 years, since right before you deployed for your first tour in Afghanistan. He reached out, wanted to reconcile. I met with him. And Nathan, he's wealthy, very wealthy. He made a fortune in tech investments. He wanted to give me money, wanted to help us, but I refused. I was too proud, too angry about him abandoning Mom and me. What does this have to do with anything? After we divorced, I went to him. I was broken. I told him everything. How I'd destroyed my marriage, how I'd betrayed the only man who ever really loved me, how I'd thrown away 14 years for a 6-month affair that meant nothing. And he asked me what I wanted to do to make it right. I looked at Frank again. He was listening but staying quiet, letting this play out. I told him I couldn't fix what I'd done to you," Jessica continued. "But maybe I could fix something else. Maybe I could help the things you care about." He asked me what that was, and I told him about this place, about what you were building, about how you'd found purpose here, how you were helping other veterans. He wrote a check the next day, $10 million, with the condition that I'd never tell you it came from me, but I couldn't stay away. I needed to see what my money was building, needed to see if you were okay. Tears were streaming down her face now. "I've driven past here at least once a week for the past 6 months, parked down the road and watched you working with those men, watched you building something incredible, and I realized I'd never seen you like that when we were married. You were good at your job, you were a good soldier, but this is what you were meant to do, and I destroyed our marriage at exactly the moment you needed to find this. I ruined everything at the exact right time. That's a hell of a rationalization." "It's not a rationalization, it's just the truth. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Nathan. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I don't deserve either. I just wanted you to know that I see what I threw away. I see it every day, and I'm trying to make up for it the only way I know how, by buying my forgiveness with your father's money." She flinched like I'd hit her. "Fair enough. That's fair." She stood up. "I should go. I just wanted you to know. Frank, thank you for letting me meet him. And Nathan, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for everything." She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the knob, and the affair ended 2 weeks after it started. Derek meant nothing. You were right about that. But I was too much of a coward to tell you, too afraid of losing what we had. So I kept the secret until you came home early, and I couldn't hide anymore. I destroyed us, trying to keep us. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know. It was 2 weeks. Not 6 months. She left before I could respond. I stood there in Frank's office trying to process what had just happened. Frank finally spoke. "I've known for 3 months," he said. "Margaret contacted me, told me the truth about the donor, asked me if I thought you could handle knowing. I told her I didn't know, but I figured you deserved the truth eventually. $10 million because she feels guilty. $10 million because she loved you and still does. There's a difference. I don't know what to do with this information, Frank. I don't know how to feel about it." "Then don't decide right now." Frank stood up, put a hand on my shoulder. "You've built something extraordinary here, Nathan. Regardless of where the money came from, the work is real. The lives you're changing are real. Don't let this take that away from you." He was right, of course. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the work harder than ever. We opened the medical clinic in November, started job training programs, expanded our capacity to house 40 veterans long-term. Every day, men came through who needed help, who needed hope, who needed someone to believe they were worth saving. But I couldn't stop thinking about Jessica, about her parked down the road watching me work, about her donating $10 million she'd gotten from the father who abandoned her, about her wearing her wedding ring a year after our divorce was finalized. In December, I called her, used the number Margaret had given me. She answered on the second ring. "Nathan, we should talk, properly. Not in Frank's office with an audience. Can you meet me?" We met at a diner halfway between the camp and her apartment in Raleigh. It was neutral ground, nothing that belonged to our old life together. She looked nervous when she arrived, kept fidgeting with her coffee cup. "Thank you for calling," she said. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either." I paused. "Why did you really give us that money, Jess? And don't tell me it's just guilt." She was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "When I was with Derek, all those months I was lying to you. I kept telling myself I was unhappy, that you were never home, that you'd chosen the army over me, that I deserved to be happy. I built this whole narrative where I was the victim and you were the one who'd failed me. Go on. Then you came home early and I saw your face, the way you looked at me, like I'd killed something inside you, and I realized I'd been lying to myself the whole time. I wasn't unhappy because you were deployed. I was unhappy because I was selfish and I didn't know how to handle being alone. And instead of being honest about that, instead of doing the hard work of supporting my husband while he served, I destroyed everything." She wiped her eyes. "After the divorce, I hit rock bottom. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept thinking about you, wondering if you were okay, if you hated me. My dad, when I finally went to see him, he said something that stuck with me. He said the worst thing he ever did wasn't leaving my mum. It was never trying to make amends, never trying to fix what he broke. And I didn't want to be him. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life knowing I'd hurt someone I loved and never even tried to make it right. So you donated $10 million. So I funded the thing you care about most. Because I couldn't give you back what I took. Couldn't give you back your trust or those lost years or the future we should have had. But I could give you this. Could help you build something that actually matters. Do you want me back?" I asked directly. "Is that what this is about?" She met my eyes. "I want you to be happy. If that's without me, then I'll live with that. But yes, if there's any chance, any possibility that you could forgive me eventually, then yes. I want us back. I want the life we should have had. I've spent a year learning to live without you, learning to be okay on my own. I know, and you're better at it than I am. I'm still a mess. Still wake up at night thinking about what I threw away. The affair was really just 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I swear on everything. Derek and I went to dinner 3 times. We kissed twice. We had sex once at his apartment, and I hated myself immediately after. I ended it the next day, but I was too afraid to tell you because I knew it would destroy us, so I just kept the secret and let it eat at me. And then you came home, and I had to watch you realize what I'd done. Why didn't you just tell me then when I asked? Because I'm a coward. Because I thought maybe if you believed it was 6 months, it would hurt less than knowing I threw away 14 years for something that meant so little. I know that doesn't make sense. It doesn't. But I understand it. Fear makes people do stupid things. We sat in silence for a while. The diner was nearly empty, just us and a waitress who kept refilling our coffee without asking. "I can't promise you anything," I said finally. "I can't promise I'll forgive you or that we'll get back together. I can't even promise I'll stop being angry. I'm not asking for promises, but I can promise I'll think about it. Really think about it. And maybe we can start by just being friends, or whatever we were before we were married. Can you do that? Can you be patient while I figure this out?" She smiled through tears. "I can be patient. I've gotten good at waiting, at watching from a distance. I can do this." We started slow. Coffee once a week, then dinner every other week. She came to the camp sometimes, helped in the medical clinic. She was still a nurse, still good at taking care of people, and the veterans loved her. She didn't talk down to them or treat them like they were broken. She just listened and helped and made them feel human. I watched her with Carl Rodriguez one day. He'd been having panic attacks, flashbacks to Vietnam. She sat with him for 2 hours, just talking, letting him work through it. When he finally calmed down, he looked at her and said, "You're good people, Jessica. The Sergeant Major's lucky to have you around." She glanced at me across the clinic. "I'm the lucky one." By spring, we were spending most evenings together, talking about everything, the past, the mistakes, what we wanted from the future. She told me about her father, about how she'd reconnected with him, how he was dying now from cancer and wanted to make amends before he went. How he'd asked if she'd forgiven him and she'd said she was trying. "Have you forgiven me?" she asked one night. We were sitting by the lake, watching the sunset. It was exactly 1.5 years since that October night when I'd come home and found her with Derek. "I'm getting there," I said. "I don't think I'll ever forget. Don't think I want to, but I'm learning to live with it. Learning that people make mistakes and sometimes Those mistakes don't have to define everything. What changed? What made you willing to try? Honestly, the work. Helping these veterans. Some of them did terrible things in war, things that haunt them, things they can't take back. But they're trying to be better, trying to build lives that matter despite the guilt and the shame. If I can see their worth, see past their worst moments, then maybe I owe you the same chance. She took my hand. It was the first time we'd touched, really touched, since the divorce. It felt familiar and strange all at once. We got remarried on a Saturday in June. Small ceremony, just Frank and a few of the guys from the camp. Carl was my best man. He wore a suit for the first time in 20 years and cried through the entire service. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you this is a fairy tale ending," Carl said in his toast. "The Sergeant Major and Jessica, they've been through hell. They hurt each other. They fell apart. But they did something most people don't have the guts to do. They put in the work to rebuild. That's what matters. Not whether you fall down, whether you get back up." Jessica moved into the cabin with me. We renovated it together, made it actually livable. She took a job at the camp's medical clinic working with the veterans. We fell into a routine, up at 0500, coffee together on the porch. She'd go to the clinic. I'd work on whatever project needed doing. Evenings we'd cook dinner, talk about our days, go to bed in the same bed. It wasn't the same as before, better in some ways. We didn't take anything for granted now, didn't assume we'd always be together. Worked on our marriage every single day like it was a project that could fail if we stopped paying attention. In August, her father passed away. Pancreatic cancer. Same thing that had killed William Chen in that other story that someone told me once. We drove to Pennsylvania for the funeral. Small service, not many people. He'd been estranged from most of his family. "He told me something before he died," Jessica said on the drive back. "He said the best thing he ever did was give me the money for your camp. Said it was the only time in his life he'd used his wealth for something that actually mattered. Sounds like he made his peace. I think he did. And I think I did too." She looked at me. "Nathan, I spent so long being angry at him for leaving, for not being there. But he came back. He tried to make it right. That's more than a lot of people do. Yeah, it is. The camp continued to grow. By the end of our second year, we had 70 veterans in our long-term program, 150 coming through our day services. We'd helped place 63 guys in permanent jobs. 14 had gone back to school. 7 had reconnected with their families. And most importantly, not a single one of the men in our program had committed suicide. That last statistic was the one that kept me going. 22 veterans kill themselves every day in this country. We'd saved 70 men from becoming part of that number. Frank died in November. Heart attack, quick and painless. He was at home, reading the newspaper, just slipped away. We held his funeral at the camp at the place he'd dreamed about for 20 years. Over 200 people came, veterans, staff, donors, politicians, all there to honor a man who'd spent his last 2 decades trying to fix the system that had failed his son. I gave the eulogy, talked about how Frank had given me a mission when I had nothing, how he'd built something that would outlive all of us, how he'd trusted me with his dream, and I'd do everything in my power to make sure it survived him. After the funeral, Jessica and I walked down to the dock, the one we'd rebuilt in those first weeks. We sat there in silence, watching the water. "He'd be proud of you," she said. "Of what you've built here. We built it, you, me, Frank, all the guys who came through. This isn't my thing, it's ours." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad I came back. Glad you gave me another chance." "Me too." We sat there until the sun set, until the North Carolina night settled in around us. Somewhere in the camp, I could hear laughter. Probably some of the guys sitting around the fire pit, telling stories, being brothers, being family. I thought about that night 2 years ago, when I'd stood in my driveway and watched my wife laugh with another man, how it had felt like the end of everything, how I'd been so certain I'd lost it all. But I hadn't lost everything. I'd just lost the life I thought I was supposed to have, and in losing it I'd found something better, something real. This wasn't a fairy tale. Jessica and I still fought sometimes, still had trust issues we were working through, still had days where the past rose up and threatened everything, but we were fighting for it, fighting for us, and that was enough. The camp would continue. More veterans would come through, broken men looking for a second chance. We'd help as many as we could. Save as many lives as possible. Build something that mattered. And maybe eventually, I'd stop wondering what would have happened if I hadn't come home early that October night. If I'd never seen Derek in my kitchen, never confronted Jessica, never filed for divorce, maybe I'd realize that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things we'll ever do. That betrayal can become purpose. That broken things can be rebuilt into something stronger than they ever were before. I wasn't there yet, but I was getting closer. One day at a time. One veteran at a time. One honest conversation with my wife at a time. And in the end, maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything.